The BBC News. Now we're going to head to El Salvador, where back in February, the president announced he was moving thousands of high-ranking gang members to the country's new so-called mega jail.
This is President Nayib Bukele's mega prison, the largest in Latin America, built just a few years ago. When Bukele took office in 2019, El Salvador had the highest murder rate in the world. Today, it boasts the second lowest crime rate in the Western Hemisphere, just behind Canada. Countless governments are stunned by this rapid transformation, but many argue that it came at a steep price. Recently, 2,000 inmates were moved to this facility as part of the ongoing crackdown on crime. The prison is filled with men and women marked by tattoos, believed to be members of notorious gangs such as MS-13 and Barrio 18. The mega prison is a central piece in Bukele's strategy against gangs. It features amenities for guards, including dining areas, restrooms, a gym, and ping-pong tables. However, inmates face harsh conditions in punishment cells designed to be austere. Despite these tough measures, the prison administration claims to address the health and well-being of inmates through daily water quality checks and medical care within the facility. To understand Bukele's brutal war on gangs, we must understand the origins of the violence in El Salvador. In February 1980, Archbishop Oscar Romero, a powerful figure in the Catholic country, was assassinated after pleading with the U.S. government to stop funding the Salvadoran military regime. His death sparked massive protests, and the military's response was brutal, killing 42 people at his funeral. This was just the beginning. The Salvadoran National Guard continued its reign of terror, culminating in the brutal murder of 4 American missionaries in December 1980. It wasn't until after these atrocities that the U.S. halted military aid. In response to the government's oppression, the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front, FMLN, was formed in 1981. This paramilitary group fought the regime with equal violence. However, when Ronald Reagan took office, he increased military aid to El Salvador, fueling further violence throughout the 1980s. El Salvador was engulfed in a civil war marked by unspeakable violence and brutality, with bodies littering the streets. Fast forward to today, President Bukele's heavy-handed approach has significantly reduced violence, earning him widespread support. Yet, this approach has also drawn severe criticism for human rights abuses and the potential slide toward authoritarianism. As El Salvador continues its war on gangs, the world watches closely, torn between admiring the drop in crime and condemning the methods used to achieve it. The war's brutality reached unprecedented levels. People died too fast to be buried properly, and women were subjected to horrific abuse. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, the FMLN lost its foreign support, and Reagan no longer had the Cold War as an excuse to fund the Salvadoran military. Though the war officially ended, thousands of Salvadorans fled to the U.S. Traumatized young men in Los Angeles formed El Salvador's bloodiest gangs, Mississippi, 13, and Barrio 18. They met immigrants from other countries and formed the Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13, known for their extreme brutality. MS-13 gained a reputation for machete slayings and violence. By 2012, the U.S. Treasury designated it as a transnational criminal organization, placing it alongside notorious international cartels. In response, Reagan implemented stricter immigration laws, and by 1996, new laws ensured the deportation of criminal Latin Americans. This policy sent many gang members back to El Salvador, where they quickly took control, overpowering the National Guard and the government, and preying on women and children. As late as 2015, El Salvador had the highest femicide rate in the world. 1 in 5,000 women would lose her life, and countless others were victims of horrific sexual assaults. The law was lax, and the gangs ruled with fear. The country had a murder rate 20 times higher than the U.S., making it the most dangerous place in the world. Most governments advised against visiting El Salvador due to the rampant crime and lack of justice. Gang members knew they would either end up dead or in prison. In some prisons, guards no longer intervened to keep the peace, leading to daily violence between MS-13 and Barrio 18 members. The government tried separating them into different prisons, but the violence persisted. Some gang members became so notorious that they were recruited by major Mexican cartels like the Zetas and Sijang. This brutal environment was a living nightmare for anyone not in a gang, and women and children felt especially doomed. El Salvador has seen a sudden and dramatic change under its new president, Nayib Bukele. Today, El Salvador feels much safer, largely due to an increased police presence. Look at how gang-related murders have decreased from 2015 to 2022. By 2024, El Salvador's murder rate stands at 2.4 per 100,000 citizens, the second lowest in the Western Hemisphere, even lower than the United States. Everyone praises President Nayib Bukele for this remarkable transformation since he took office in 2019. Bukele has arrested more than 10% of the country's population, about 880,000 people out of 6.3 million. Over the past year alone, more than 65,000 people have been arrested, and in total, over 70,000 are now in custody. Human rights groups and relatives of the arrested are dismayed by these actions. However, the government proudly points to the massive decline in the country's murder rate. Imagine living in constant fear your entire life, and now, for the first time, your children can play outside safely. It's hard to fathom 80,000 people suddenly being arrested in a country of just over 6 million. Bukele promised a brutal crackdown on gangs from the moment he was elected, and he has delivered on that promise, transforming the country in a very short time. El Salvador's future looks brighter, but at what cost? Nayib Bukele, the first president of the New Ideas Party, took office after decades of leadership by other parties. His three predecessors were jailed for collaborating with gangs. Bukele's party had one clear goal: to separate the good from the bad and ensure the safety of the innocent. A country thrives when law enforcement protects its citizens and arrests criminals. It sounds simple, but El Salvador struggled for years to achieve this peace and safety. For decades, violent and oppressive groups controlled the nation, making this transformation costly. On March 24, 2022, many Salvadorans were enjoying another peaceful day. However, this peace was shattered by an unprecedented wave of gang violence. MS-13 and Barrio 18, angry at Bukele's crackdown, retaliated fiercely. Between March 24 and 27, 2022, gang members killed 87 people almost at random. Desperate times call for desperate measures. As the gangs demonstrated their power, Bukele decided to intensify his efforts. He ramped up law enforcement, resulting in thousands of arrests and a significant crime reduction. While the streets of El Salvador became safer, the country paid a high price for this newfound peace. The struggle for safety and justice in El Salvador continues, with President Bukele's actions leaving a profound impact on the nation's future. In a unanimous vote, 64 legislators approved a state of emergency in El Salvador, suspending basic human rights to imprison every gang member. Initially meant to last 30 days, this state of emergency has been extended monthly and continues as of April 2024. The government is no longer required to inform individuals of their arrest reasons. Freedom of assembly and privacy in communications have been suspended. Arresting tens of thousands of gang members is no easy task. It requires a massive and brutal task force. El Salvador's prisons, already overcrowded, now face even more strain. El Salvador's prisons were notorious for overcrowding even before this crackdown. During the COVID-19 pandemic, social distancing was impossible, leading to widespread virus outbreaks. Despite these challenges, El Salvador's murder rate has significantly dropped, from a high of 17.6 murders per day in 2015 to 2.1 in March 2020. President Bukele credits his zero-tolerance policy towards gang violence for this decline. To manage the influx of prisoners, Bukele introduced the prison C-cot, designed to hold 40,000 inmates, with each cell accommodating up to 100 prisoners. If needed, more prisons will be built, and the crackdown will continue. While some criticize Bukele's methods, most Salvadorans support him. For the first time in generations, women and children feel safe from daily violence. Bukele's approval rating stands at 92%, far above the average for most presidents. However, the crackdown has not been without controversy. Human rights organizations report deaths and abuses in prisons, and sometimes innocent people are wrongfully arrested. Human rights should be upheld regardless of the context. Critics argue that Bukele's methods are excessively brutal and question the long-term sustainability of his approach. El Salvador's fight against gang violence has garnered international attention. As other countries consider similar measures, the world watches to see if a balance can be struck between security and human rights